The galaxy was burning. Worlds that once shone with life were now covered in smoke and fire. Fleets that had ruled the stars for millennia were broken, their ships scattered like ash in the wind. The enemy was everywhere. Strong, fast, merciless. No alliance of alien races had been able to stop them. Every battle ended the same way: silence, wreckage, and death. Across the stars, a cold fear spread. It was not the kind of fear that made people scream or run. It was a silent fear, a heavy weight pressing down on entire civilizations. Planets that once rang with songs and laughter now spoke in whispers. Leaders met in dark halls, their voices shaking as they asked the same question again and again. How much longer can we survive? In the great council chamber of the Carveth Alliance, alien leaders gathered. Their faces were pale, their eyes filled with dread. Holograms of destroyed fleets floated in the air above them, hundreds of ships reduced to nothing but fragments. One alien, his voice trembling, spoke out. "We have tried everything. We have given all that we have. Yet the enemy only grows stronger. Our fleets are dust. Our soldiers are gone. Our people lose hope. Soon there will be nothing left." A heavy silence followed. No one could argue. Every word was true. They were losing, and the galaxy was falling. Another leader, older and weaker than the rest, leaned forward. His eyes were clouded with age, but his voice carried a strange weight. "There was once a power in this galaxy," he said. "A power unlike any other. A race that fought not with fear, but with fury. They were called humans." At the mention of that name, the chamber grew restless. Some looked away. Others whispered. Humans were a legend now, a story told to children before sleep. They were said to have been fierce, proud, and impossible to break. But they had vanished long ago, leaving behind only ruins and half-forgotten tales. The old leader continued, his voice steady. "I have heard the stories, as you all have. The humans built a fleet so strong it shook the stars. They fought wars no other race dared to fight. And then one day they disappeared. Some say they were destroyed. Others say they chose to vanish, to sleep until the galaxy called for them again." A young alien commander stood up, his eyes flashing with anger. "Stories will not save us. Legends will not fight for us. Humanity is gone, old one. We must face the truth." But the old leader only shook his head. "Perhaps. And yet, when I close my eyes, I can still see their ships. Vast giants of metal and fire stretching across the heavens. I can still hear their voices, promising to return if the galaxy ever needed them." The room fell silent again. None wanted to believe, yet none could fully deny it either. The humans had been real. Their fleet had been real. The only question was, where were they now? Outside the chamber, across the stars, whispers spread. Refugees spoke of strange signals coming from forgotten corners of the galaxy. Some claimed to have seen enormous shadows drifting among the stars, ships too large to belong to any living race. Others told of ancient ruins that glowed with power once thought lost. The stories were dismissed as madness, the dreams of desperate souls. And yet the whispers continued to grow. In hidden camps on dying worlds, alien children asked their parents, "Will the humans come back?" The parents, with tears in their eyes, could only answer, "We hope so." Meanwhile, the enemy moved closer. Their black ships cut through space like blades, and entire systems fell in days. The fear deepened. Leaders argued. Armies broke. And still the whispers of humanity refused to die. In one forgotten sector, a fleet of alien scouts disappeared without a trace. No distress calls. No wreckage. Only silence. And from that silence came a signal, old, faint, and unmistakably human. Back in the council chamber, the old leader's words hung in the air like smoke. "If only the forgotten fleet of humanity returned," he whispered. "If only they stood with us again. Then perhaps the galaxy would have hope." The others said nothing. They wanted to laugh, but could not. They wanted to deny, but dared not. Somewhere deep inside, even they wished the old stories were true. The galaxy was falling into shadow, and only a miracle could save it. And so the whispers grew louder. Across war-torn worlds, across dying skies, One hope remained, that somewhere, hidden in the darkness, humanity's forgotten fleet was waiting. The war did not stop. Each passing day brought new defeats. Entire worlds went dark, their cities reduced to ruins and silence. The enemy spread like a storm, cold and unstoppable. Still, the whispers about humanity refused to fade. Instead, they grew stronger, echoing through the broken halls of dying civilizations. The whispers began with faint signals. Strange transmissions flickered across the stars. Old codes. Old patterns. Scholars from many races studied them and shook their heads in disbelief. The codes were human, not modern, not recent, but ancient. At first, the Council dismissed them. They called the signals nothing more than echoes, fragments of a dead past. But deep inside, many wondered, if the signals were real, then what else might be waiting in the shadows of forgotten space? Among the alien races, stories began to rise. A trader spoke of seeing enormous shapes drifting near the edge of a collapsing star. A miner swore he had discovered giant wrecks hidden in the rocks of an asteroid belt, wrecks that hummed with sleeping power. Soldiers, tired and broken, told each other tales of great ships rising once again to bring hope. But the most chilling rumors came from scouts. One patrol sent into the outer rim never returned. Another followed, and again, silence. No wreckage. No distress calls. Only a single pulse of sound left behind, a signal that repeated again and again in the darkness. It was not a language any alien could read. But the pattern was familiar. It matched the rhythm of an old human war call. The whispers became impossible to ignore. Leaders met once more in their great halls, the air heavy with tension. "If these stories are true," one commander said, "then we must find this fleet. If humanity truly built such ships, perhaps they still exist." But another leader slammed his hand against the table. "And if they are nothing but ghosts? We have no time for fairy tales. The enemy is at our gates. We need ships, not stories." The council was divided. Some wanted to search, to chase the faint signals. Others wanted to ignore them, to fight with what little they had left. Yet beneath their arguments, a quiet hope stirred. For even the coldest hearts could not stop imagining the sight of great human warships rising from the dark. On the ruined world of Carthage, a group of survivors huddled in the ruins of their city. Above them, the sky burned red from enemy fire. As they waited for the end, one of them looked up and whispered, "Do you think the humans will come?" Another, broken and weak, gave a faint smile. "If they do, the enemy will finally know fear." Far away, deep inside forgotten space, the silence was not empty. Beneath the surface of an ancient planet, hidden for centuries, something stirred. Huge metal forms lay buried beneath forests and mountains. Moss and vines crawled across their surfaces, as if nature itself had tried to hide them. Yet inside, the machines still lived. Engines that had not burned for hundreds of years flickered with light. Systems long thought dead began to hum softly, as if answering the call of the galaxy's despair. The whispers had awakened something. On one cold night, in a system no one had visited for ages, a single light appeared in the darkness. Then another. Then 100. They were not stars. They were engines. The forgotten fleet of humanity was no longer silent. The first ships began to rise from their hiding places. They were massive, their hulls scarred from ancient battles, dust and vines falling away as they climbed into the sky. Their size dwarfed the alien ships of today. Each one was a giant of metal and fire. To the scouts who first saw them, the sight was overwhelming. Some wept. Some could only stare. These were not the ships of stories. These were real. They existed. And they were awakening. The whispers turned to shouts across the galaxy. Word spread like fire. The humans had not been destroyed. Their fleet had not vanished into nothing. It had been waiting, sleeping, hidden in the dark, until the time was right. And now the time had come. In the council chamber, the old leader who had spoken of humanity before stood once more. His voice shook, but not with fear. With hope. "I told you," he said. "The forgotten fleet was never gone. Humanity does not die. Humanity waits. And when the galaxy cries, humanity answers." No one argued. For outside, across the stars, the first shadows of the ancient fleet moved into the light. And with them came the promise of war. The galaxy held its breath. The whispers had turned into stories, and the stories had become hope. Yet no one truly believed until the first images appeared. An alien scout ship, fleeing from the enemy, drifted near a forgotten sector of space. Its sensors picked up something impossible. Massive heat signatures, larger than any ship known today, pulsing beneath the surface of a quiet green world. At first, the crew thought it was an error. Then the ground itself cracked open. From deep valleys and hidden caverns, shadows began to rise. The scouts' cameras shook as the crew watched in silence. Giants of steel emerged from the earth, tearing free from centuries of rock, roots, and moss. Engines coughed to life, their glow spreading like sunrise across the hulls. Ships older than memory, scarred from wars long past, now climbed into the skies once more. The scout crew could not speak. Some fell to their knees. One whispered, "It is them. It has to be them." And in that moment, the galaxy changed forever. The awakening had begun. Across the planet's forests, more ships rose. Their surfaces were coated in green moss and vines, but beneath the decay was strength. Symbols of humanity, faded and broken, still shone faintly under the light. The ships were enormous, dwarfing the alien vessels of today. Their shapes were sharp and powerful, designed for war. The largest of them broke free from a mountain that had grown around it. As its engines roared, the mountain crumbled, sending stone and dust into the air. The ship's shadow stretched for miles, blocking out the sun. For the first time in centuries, the forgotten fleet of humanity was awake. The alien scout transmitted the images across the galaxy. Within hours, every surviving world had seen them. Entire populations wept openly. Soldiers in the trenches raised their heads and cried out. Children in ruined cities pointed to the sky with smiles. Even the council leaders, once cold and divided, stared at the footage in silence. The old leader let tears run down his face. "They live," he whispered. "By the stars, they live." Not all greeted the awakening with joy. On the other side of the galaxy, the enemy felt it. Their ships halted mid-flight. Their commanders, once certain of victory, hesitated for the first time. The return of humanity's fleet was not a rumor to them. It was a nightmare reborn. For long ago, the enemy had fought these ships before, and they remembered the price they had paid. Meanwhile, deep inside the awakened fleet, the ships themselves were not empty. Frozen chambers unlocked. Lights flickered on inside cold corridors. Ancient systems, guided by artificial minds, carried out their commands. Engines roared higher. Weapons hummed. A voice, calm, human, and unbroken, spoke through the comms for the first time in centuries. System check complete. All units online. Awaiting command. The scout ship, still circling in awe, received the signal. The crew could not understand every word, but one message was clear. Humanity had not abandoned the galaxy. Humanity had been waiting. The transmission reached the council chamber. Leaders leaned forward, their hands shaking as the human voice echoed through the hall. The young commander who had once mocked the old leader's stories lowered his head. He could not deny it anymore. "They have returned," he said quietly. The galaxy shook as the fleet gathered. One by one, the warships rose into the black sky. They formed lines, their engines glowing like suns, their hulls, though scarred and ancient, burning with a terrible beauty. Even after centuries, they were more powerful than anything alive today. In refugee camps, aliens who had given up hope now cried tears of joy. They fell to their knees, whispering the name of humanity as if it were a prayer. In broken cities, survivors pointed upward, promising their children that salvation had come. But the awakening was not gentle. Forests burned as the ships tore free. Mountains collapsed. Oceans boiled under the power of their engines. The world that had hidden them was left in ruins. It had served its purpose. It had kept the fleet safe until the galaxy needed it again. And now the galaxy needed them. In the depths of space, the fleet aligned itself. Great cannons stretched from their sides, glowing faintly as if remembering the wars they once fought. Hundreds of smaller ships swarmed around the giants, their engines like fireflies against the endless night. The first signal from humanity's fleet reached across the stars. It was short. It was simple. And it made every heart tremble. "We are awake." The words spread faster than light. Entire systems lit up with hope. Enemies froze in terror. The galaxy, once drowned in fear, now looked to the heavens with new eyes. Because the legends were no longer legends. The forgotten fleet was real. And it had returned. The galaxy had not heard the voice of humanity for centuries. And yet, when the signal rang out, "We are awake," every corner of space seemed to stop and listen. It was not loud. It was not shouted. But it carried the weight of a storm. On dying worlds, survivors lifted their heads to the sky. In the ruins of cities, soldiers clutched their weapons with trembling hands. Across the galaxy, the message was repeated again and again, a beacon in the dark. Humanity was alive. The council gathered once more, their chamber alive with noise. Leaders argued, voices breaking from fear and hope. "What if they are hostile?" one asked. "What if they return not to save us, but to rule us?" Others dismissed the thought. "Do you not see? They came when the galaxy cried out. They came when all else failed. If they wished to conquer us, they would have done so long ago. No, they came to fight." The debate ended when the human fleet moved. From the hidden world, hundreds of ships rose into formation. Their engines flared, and their shadows stretched across the stars. They flew with precision, like a single being, their lines sharper than any living fleet had ever formed. Old yet unstoppable. Scarred yet powerful. They carried the presence of gods. Alien commanders watched in awe as the ancient warships emerged into the open void. Some wept at the sight. Others simply fell silent, unable to believe their eyes. For these were not just machines. They were symbols of a race that had once stood unbroken against the darkness. The human fleet sent its first transmission to the galaxy. The voice was calm, steady, and filled with unshaken strength. "To the people of this galaxy, we hear your cries. We know your fear. But you are not alone. We are humanity, and we have returned." The words broke through despair like fire through ice. Across countless systems, refugees shouted with joy. Children repeated the words until they echoed through the ruins of their homes. Soldiers who had nearly surrendered stood tall once more. But hope alone was not enough. The enemy was moving. Their black fleet swarmed closer to the awakening sector, drawn by the power of humanity's return. They came in waves, dark and endless, blotting out the stars. And so the time for waiting was over. The human fleet adjusted its lines. Weapons that had slept for centuries now glowed with furious light. Great cannons, longer than cities, hummed with energy. Smaller ships moved into wings, their speed terrifying to watch. Every system was alive. Every weapon charged. The first clash came suddenly. Enemy ships fell upon the awakened fleet, confident from years of victory. They fired, their dark beams cutting through the void. But the humans did not break. The first return volley came like thunder. Human cannons roared, tearing the enemy apart in bursts of white fire. Whole enemy formations vanished in seconds, reduced to dust and silence. The galaxy had forgotten what human weapons could do. Now they remembered. Alien commanders watching from afar cried out in disbelief. They cut through them like nothing. Their weapons are beyond anything we have seen. The battle spread across the system. Enemy ships swarmed in the millions, but the human fleet met them with fury. Their movements were precise, their fire relentless. Where the enemy pressed, the humans pushed back harder. Where the enemy tried to surround, the humans broke through. The forgotten fleet was not only alive, it was unstoppable. Among the alien fleets that had survived, a choice was made. Their ships, weak and broken, moved to join the battle. They formed beside the humans, their commanders speaking through shaking voices. "To the humans who have returned, we stand with you." The reply from the human flagship was simple. "Then stand and fight." Together, alien and human ships clashed with the enemy. For the first time in years, the war shifted. It was no longer retreat after retreat. It was not despair. It was defiance. It was fury. And as the battle raged, something incredible happened. The enemy, who had never shown fear, began to hesitate. Their lines wavered. Their ships pulled back. Against every other race, they had been merciless. But against the forgotten fleet of humanity, they faltered. On one world, an alien child looked to the sky as the news reached them. "The humans are here," she whispered. Her mother, tears running down her face, nodded. "Yes, my child. And with them, hope returns." The war was far from over. The enemy was still vast, still deadly, but the galaxy was no longer helpless. Humanity had returned, and their presence changed everything. In the council chamber, silence fell as they watched the first battle end. Wreckage floated in space, thousands of enemy ships destroyed, and at the heart of it all, the human fleet burned like a rising sun. The old leader stood, his eyes wet with tears. "Do you see? They are not myths. They are not ghosts. Humanity has come back to us, and with them, the galaxy will rise." Every voice in the chamber joined in one word, spoken as both a prayer and a promise. Humanity. The war had changed. For years, the galaxy had known only loss. Planets burned. Fleets shattered. Hope crushed under the weight of an enemy no one could resist. But now a new sound filled the stars, the thunder of humanity's return. Their ancient fleet cut through the darkness like fire through dry grass. Their cannons roared, tearing the enemy apart in bursts of white light. Ships that had once crushed whole civilizations now fell in pieces before them. For the first time, the galaxy saw the enemy retreat. And with that retreat came something even greater: hope. In refugee camps, people who had stopped believing now fell to their knees, crying tears of joy. On broken worlds, survivors raised their eyes and whispered prayers to the humans. Soldiers on the front lines shouted with fury and courage, no longer afraid to die because they knew they were no longer alone. The galaxy had been given a second chance. But the enemy was not finished. They regrouped, gathering their endless numbers. Their dark fleet stretched across the void, millions of ships pressing forward. They were furious, more determined than ever. They would crush the humans, erase their fleet, and end the spark of hope before it spread. The humans knew this, and they did not run. The forgotten fleet stood tall, its lines strong, its weapons burning. Human commanders, their voices steady, guided their ships with precision. Their tactics were sharp, their courage unbroken. They had waited centuries for this moment, and they would not fail. The battle grew. It was no longer one fleet against another. It was the galaxy itself rising. Alien ships once shattered and scattered now returned. Broken vessels were repaired. Old engines forced to life. Soldiers climbing back into their cockpits with renewed fire. They came from every corner of space, small fighters, heavy cruisers, carriers barely holding together. They joined the humans, forming a wall of light against the enemy's darkness. And in that wall, something powerful happened. The aliens no longer saw themselves as weak or broken. They looked at the humans, at their ancient fleet, and they remembered what courage was. They remembered what it felt like to fight, not with fear, but with hope. Side by side, they struck back. The enemy swarmed, but the combined fleets held. Human cannons blasted holes through enemy lines. Alien ships darted forward, striking with new bravery. The void was filled with fire, with wreckage, with the soundless storm of war. And through it all, one truth spread. Humanity had not returned for themselves. They had returned for everyone. In the council chamber, the leaders watched the battle unfold on massive screens. Many wept openly, their voices breaking with emotion. "Look at them," one whispered. "They fight as if they never left us. As if they were always here." The old leader, who had never stopped believing, closed his eyes, tears running down his cheeks. "This is what legends are made of," he said softly. "Not stories for children. Not myths. This is the truth of humanity." The battle reached its peak. The enemy pressed harder, sending waves upon waves. The galaxy trembled. Worlds shook under the fire. And then, in the darkest hour, the humans gave their final command. "All fleets, together." The alien commanders obeyed. For once, the galaxy moved as one. Hundreds of thousands of ships, human and alien alike, formed a single line. Weapons charged. Engines flared. And then, with one united strike, they fired. The void lit up brighter than a sun. The enemy's front lines shattered. Their fleets broke apart. Their confidence destroyed. They retreated faster than they had ever attacked, fleeing into the shadows from which they had come. The galaxy was silent. Ships floated in the wreckage, their hulls scorched, their crews exhausted. But they were alive. They had fought, and they had won. And at the heart of it all, the forgotten fleet of humanity burned like a beacon, its engines glowing, its cannons still hot with fire. The war was not over. The enemy would return. Everyone knew this. But something greater had been born in that battle. A belief. A unity. A legend. In refugee camps, survivors cried tears of joy, holding their children close and whispering that the galaxy was safe, at least for now. Soldiers embraced, their voices shaking as they shouted humanity's name. Even the leaders, once divided, now stood together, their hearts filled with respect for the race that had returned when all seemed lost. And above them all, the humans spoke once more. To the people of this galaxy, do not fear. As long as we stand, you will never be alone. This is our promise. The promise spread across every world, every station, every heart. It became a flame that no darkness could fully kill. For the legend was real. The forgotten fleet of humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. The days after the battle were unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. For the first time in decades, refugees emerged from their shelters and looked up at the stars without fear. The enemy had retreated beyond the outer reaches, licking wounds that had been centuries in the making. But everyone knew the silence would not last. The enemy would regroup. They would return. And when they did, they would bring everything. In the council chamber, the old leader, whose name was Tharvan of the Karveth, stood before the assembled delegations. His voice was steady now, no longer trembling with age. Something had returned to him along with the human fleet. Hope had given him strength. "We must prepare," he said. "The enemy will come again. But now we are not alone. The humans have returned. Their fleet is mighty, but it is not infinite. We must fight beside them. Not as followers, as equals." A murmur rippled through the chamber. For centuries, the alien races had fought alone, fractured, desperate. The idea of unity had been a dream, beautiful but impossible. Yet now, with human warships still glowing in orbit above their worlds, the impossible felt within reach. The human flagship sent a transmission. A face appeared on the screen, not young, not old, but something in between. Her name was Admiral Elara Vance, commander of the Forgotten Fleet. Her eyes were dark and steady, her voice calm. "Council leaders, we did not return to command you. We returned to fight with you. But we cannot win alone. The enemy feeds on division. They exploit fear. They conquer because no one stands together. That ends now." She paused. "We will share our tactical data. We will coordinate our movements. We will fight alongside your ships. But you must decide, are you ready to stand as one?" The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Tharvan raised his hand. "The Karveth stand with humanity." One by one, the other delegations followed. The Silhari, the Dreth, the Velhari, species that had once been rivals, enemies, strangers, all pledged themselves to the alliance. The galaxy had not seen such unity in recorded history. It was not a fleet. It was a family. Admiral Vance nodded. "Then let us prepare." The enemy's response came 3 weeks later. Not with a fleet, with a message. It was broadcast on every frequency, in every language. The voice was cold, mechanical, without emotion. "You have delayed the inevitable. But you have not stopped it. We are the swarm. We are endless. We have consumed galaxies before yours. We will consume this one. Your ancient fleet is a candle against a hurricane. Surrender your worlds. Surrender your species. Or be erased." The message ended. Across the galaxy, fear flickered, but did not take hold. Because this time, there was an answer. Admiral Vance's voice came through the same frequencies, calm and steady. "We have heard your threats before. We buried your kind in the last war. We will bury you again. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity does not break. And now, neither does the galaxy. She cut the transmission. In the human fleet, weapons powered up. In alien shipyards, vessels that had been derelict for decades roared to life. Soldiers trained. Pilots drilled. The galaxy was building something it had never had before. A united front. The swarm arrived at the edge of the Carveth system on a cold morning with no sun. Their ships blackened the stars, millions of them, stretching farther than any sensor could measure. They moved in perfect synchronization, a single organism with a billion limbs. On the surface of Carveth Prime, civilians watched the sky turn dark. Children clung to their parents. Soldiers gripped their weapons. But no one ran. No one screamed. Because above them, forming a wall of light against the darkness, was the combined fleet of the Alliance. Human warships at the center. Alien vessels on the flanks. And at the head of it all, the Retribution, flagship of the Forgotten Fleet, its cannons glowing like the heart of a star. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge, watching the enemy approach. Her crew moved around her with quiet efficiency. No one spoke. No one needed to. "All ships," she said. "Hold formation. Wait for my mark." The swarm came closer. Their weapons charged. The void between the fleets crackled with energy. Steady. Closer. The first enemy ships entered firing range. Their beams lanced out, striking the Alliance's forward shields. The shields held. Return fire. The human fleet opened up with everything they had. Cannons roared. Missiles streaked across the void. Alien ships added their own fire, plasma, lasers, kinetic rounds, a storm of destruction that tore into the swarm's front lines. Enemy vessels shattered. Wreckage spun into the dark. But more came. Always more. The battle had begun. And this time, the galaxy would not fall alone. The battle raged for 3 days. The swarm threw wave after wave against the Alliance fleet, but the line held. Human warships anchored the center, their ancient weapons tearing through enemy formations. Alien vessels fought on the flanks, their crews emboldened by the presence of the legendary fleet. Ships were lost on both sides, but for every Alliance vessel that fell, 10 swarm ships were reduced to scrap. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the Retribution, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. The swarm's numbers were still vast, but something had changed. Their formations were looser now, their attacks less coordinated. For the first time, the enemy seemed uncertain. "Admiral," her sensor officer called out. "I'm reading a fluctuation in their command network. They're routing signals through a single vessel, a flagship." Vance's eyes narrowed. "Show me." The display zoomed in on a massive ship at the heart of the swarm formation, larger than any other, its hull dark as obsidian. It hung back from the fighting, surrounded by a ring of elite escorts. "That's their nerve center," Vance said. "Cut it, and the swarm loses coordination." "Getting to it won't be easy," her tactical officer warned. "They've got it surrounded." Vance was quiet for a moment. Then she opened a fleet-wide channel. "All Alliance vessels. I need a corridor. Every ship, every gun, focus fire on the enemy's center. We're going through." The fleet responded. Human and alien alike turned their weapons toward the swarm's heart. The barrage was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, a concentrated storm of fire that punched through the enemy lines. Ships that had been fighting for their lives now fought for a single purpose. A gap opened. The Retribution surged forward, its engines burning white-hot. Escort vessels flanked it, firing at anything that moved. The swarm tried to close the gap, but the Alliance fleet held them back. Cannon fire. Missile volleys. Plasma beams. Every weapon, every ship, every soul pushing toward the same objective. The flagship grew larger on the viewscreen. Its escorts fired desperately, but the Retribution's shields held. Vance's weapon officer locked onto the target. Fire. The Retribution's main cannon unleashed a blast of energy that lit up the void like a second sun. The beam struck the swarm flagship dead center. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the ship began to crack, fissures spreading across its hull, light pouring from within. The swarm's flagship exploded. The shock wave rippled outward, disabling enemy ships for kilometers in every direction. And in that moment, the swarm's coordination collapsed. Their formations dissolved. Their attacks became random, desperate. They were no longer a single organism. They were a mob, and a mob could be broken. Admiral Vance gave the final order. All ships, advance. Drive them out. The Alliance fleet surged forward, human and alien together. The swarm broke. Not retreated, broke. Their ships scattered in every direction, fleeing into the void with no coordination, no purpose. The galaxy watched as the enemy that had terrorized them for decades ran for their lives. On the surface of Carveth Prime, civilians poured into the streets. They wept. They cheered. They held each other and looked up at the sky where the Alliance fleet burned like a constellation of hope. In the council chamber, Tharvan fell to his knees. Not in defeat, in gratitude. "They did it," he whispered. "Humanity did it. The war was not over. The swarm would return eventually, weakened, scattered, but not destroyed. But the galaxy had won something more important than a battle. It had won time. It had won unity. It had won the knowledge that even the darkest night could be survived." Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the enemy flee. Her crew was silent, exhausted, but alive. She looked at the display, at the Alliance ships still holding formation, at the worlds below that would see another sunrise. She opened a channel, not just to the fleet, but to every world that had watched the battle. "This is Admiral Elara Vance of the human fleet. The enemy has been driven back. But this victory belongs to all of us, to every species that stood together, to every soldier who fought, to every civilian who refused to give up hope. Humanity kept its promise. We returned. And we will stay." She paused. "The galaxy is not broken. It is not lost. It is not alone. As long as we stand together, no darkness will ever consume us. This is our promise. This is our future." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, aliens wept with joy. Not because the war was over, but because, for the first time in decades, they believed it could be won. The forgotten fleet had returned. And with it, hope had returned. The galaxy would rebuild. The galaxy would endure. And humanity would be there, every step of the way. The war did not end in a single battle. The swarm was vast, ancient, and patient. But the galaxy had changed. The alliance that formed around humanity's returned fleet did not fracture when the enemy regrouped. It grew. More species joined. More ships were built. The old divisions that had once made the galaxy weak were replaced by something that had never existed before: trust. Admiral Elara Vance did not command the alliance. No one did. The human fleet fought alongside the Carveth, the Silhari, the Dreth, and 100 others, not as masters, but as equals. That was the lesson humanity had brought back from their centuries of waiting. Power was not the ability to dominate. Power was the ability to stand together. The swarm's final offensive came 3 years after the Battle of Carveth Prime. They threw everything they had at the galactic core, hoping to decapitate the Alliance in a single stroke. They failed. The combined fleets met them in the void between stars, and for 7 days, the galaxy burned. When the last enemy ship fled into the dark, there was no celebration. Only exhaustion. Only relief. The swarm would not return. Their command structure had been shattered. Their remnants scattered into the void, leaderless and broken. The galaxy was free. Tharvan died 6 months after the final battle. He was old, and he had given everything he had. His last words were spoken to Admiral Vance, who stood at his bedside in a small room overlooking the rebuilt capital of Carveth Prime. "I believed in you," he said. "Even when no one else did. I believed." Vance took his hand. "You were right to believe." He smiled, closed his eyes, and was gone. The human fleet did not disappear again. They remained in the galaxy, stationed at key points, ready to respond if the darkness ever returned. But their ships were no longer the only ones in the sky. Alien vessels patrolled beside them. Alien crews served alongside human crews. The forgotten fleet had become the heart of something new. Elara Vance retired 5 years after the war. She moved to a small world on the edge of human space, a planet called Haven, where she grew flowers and watched the stars. Children from a dozen species visited her, asking for stories about the great battle. She told them about Tharvan, about the Alliance, about the day the galaxy chose to stand together. She did not tell them about the centuries of waiting, the cold dark, the loneliness. Some things were not for children to know. On the 100th anniversary of the fleet's return, a monument was unveiled on Carveth Prime. It was a simple stone pillar, carved with the names of every species that had fought in the war. At the top, in letters larger than the rest, was a single word: humanity. Admiral Vance did not attend the ceremony. She was too old to travel. But she watched it on a screen, sitting in her garden, surrounded by flowers and the quiet hum of a world at peace. When the ceremony ended, she looked up at the sky. The stars were the same stars that had watched humanity fall, wait, and rise again. They did not look different. They did not need to. She smiled. Then she went inside to make tea. The galaxy had not become a perfect place. There were still conflicts, still tensions, still the slow, difficult work of building a civilization that could endure. But the fear was gone. The darkness had been pushed back. And the legend of humanity's forgotten fleet was no longer a legend. It was history. And history, unlike legend, was something you could build on. The galaxy would rebuild. The galaxy would thrive. And humanity would be there, as they had always been, waiting to help. Not because they had to. Because they chose to. That was the promise. That was the future. That was everything.